The millennium spanning 8000 to 7000 BC stands as one of the most transformative periods in human history. It was an era not defined by the rise and fall of empires or the clash of great armies, but by a more profound elemental shift, the widespread adoption, consolidation and refinement of agriculture, the process often termed the Neolithic Revolution. While the initial experiments in plant and animal domestication began in the preceding millennia, this specific 1000-year window witnessed these practices become more firmly established and central to the subsistence of many communities, particularly in the Fertile Crescent. This transition laid the critical groundwork for the development of larger, permanent villages, new technologies, evolving social structures, and ultimately, the civilizations that would follow. The Fertile Crescent was at the vanguard, but distinct, often independent agricultural stirrings and significant cultural developments were also occurring elsewhere, heralding a new chapter in the human story, specifically within this time frame. In this video, we will cover some of the major events of this millennium, how it was influenced by the past, and how it further affected the future. This is the third part in the series, so if you haven't already checked out the previous two, I will leave links in the description. Now with all of that out of the way, let's get into it. The most significant development consolidated within this millennium was the intensification of agriculture. In the Fertile Crescent, by 8000 BC, communities were not just experimenting, but were systematically cultivating emmer wheat, einkorn wheat, barley, lentils, peas, and chickpeas. Sites like Abu Huraira in Syria provide crucial evidence. Its Natufian inhabitants, which were pre-8000 BC, were hunter-gatherers, but by the early part of this millennium, the site shows clear evidence of established farming and domesticated cereals. Similarly, at Jericho, layers dating squarely between 8000 and 7000 BC reveal cultivated cereals. This cuts through two significant civilizational timelines. The pre-pottery Neolithic is divided into pre-pottery Neolithic A or PPNA, which was from 10,000 to 8,800 BC, and the following pre-pottery Neolithic B or PPNB, which was 8,800 to 6,500 BC. The selection for traits like tougher stems in cereals, which prevent premature seed scattering and are a hallmark of domestication, became more pronounced. For animal domestication, while goats and sheep were tamed earlier, their management and economic importance solidified during this millennium. Evidence from sites like Ganj Dareh in Iran around 7900 BC shows some of the earliest signs of goat domestication morphologically. By the mid-8th millennium BC, domesticated forms of sheep and goats were common across the Near East. The domestication of cattle and pigs began to take hold towards the end of this period, with sites like Catuluic, founded in 7500 BC, eventually showing evidence for cattle in a domestic context, though the process was likely still in its earlier stages within the specific millennium of these larger species. This increasingly reliable agricultural package directly enabled population growth and a more permanent settlement. The shift towards agriculture had profound and immediate implications for human settlement patterns within this millennium. Jericho provides a dramatic example. A famous stone tower, wall, and ditch are dated to the PPNA period, specifically around 8000 BC. This monumental construction, requiring significant communal labour, occurred right at the beginning of our focal millennium, signifying a major step in societal organisation for these early agriculturists. The settlement itself, with its round oval mud brick houses, was a substantial village. As we move into the PPNB period, starting around 7500 BC, house forms in the Levant often transitioned to rectangular structures, a change visible at Jericho and other sites like Ain Ghazal, founded in 7250 BC in Jordan. In Anatolia, a sickly Hoyuk was occupied from approximately 8200 to 7400 BC, showing a densely packed village of rectangular mud-bricked buildings, demonstrating a long-term, stable settlement reliant on agriculture and animal husbandry through much of this millennium. The initial occupation of Çatalhöyük around 7500 to 7400 BC also falls squarely within this period, quickly growing into a large, distinctive settlement of interconnected mud brick houses accessed from rooftops. These were not ephemeral camps, but established villages, centres of the new agricultural way of life. Technological innovation specific to or significantly advancing within this period was also crucial. While ground stone tools were used earlier, their variety and sophistication increased. Polished stone axes and adzes became more common and essential for clearing land and working wood for the increasingly substantial rectangular houses of the PPNB. Sickle blades, often made of flint and hafted for harvesting cereals, are abundant in sites from this period. Grinding stones like querns and pestles are hallmark artifacts of these agricultural communities, essential for processing grain. A major technological leap was the widespread adoption and development of pottery. Though true fired pottery appears more consistently towards the middle and the end of this millennium in many Near Eastern sites. For example, the pottery Neolithic generally begins after 7000 BC in the Levant, but the preceding PPNB period saw the extensive use of whiteware, vessels made of lime plaster, which can be seen as a precursor technology. However, in regions like southern Anatolia and upper Mesopotamia, early ceramic traditions were emerging. For instance, the site of Tel Sabi Abyad in Syria shows evidence of some of the earliest pottery in the Near East, around 6900 to 6800 BC. Early weaving is also evidenced by impressions of textiles on clay and finds of spindle whorls on sites dated to this millennium, indicating the production of linen from flax. The Near East and Anatolia were undeniably the heartland for these Neolithic transformations. The decline and final abandonment of the hunter-gatherer ritual centre of Göbekli Tepe around 8000 BC is a highly significant event, marking the start of this millennium, symbolising a shift away from large-scale hunter-gatherer communal ritualism. In its place, the ritual life of the new agricultural villages, as seen in the PPNB period, focused more on household-based practices, ancestor veneration, and fertility, evidenced by numerous human and animal figurines. The increasing size of settlements like Ain Ghazal, which grew to be a mega-site by the end of this millennium, points to successful adaptation but also to emerging social complexities in managing larger populations. While the Near East was advancing rapidly, Europe was still largely in the Mesolithic. However, the very beginning of the Neolithic expansion into Europe occurred at the tail end of this millennium. Around 7000 BC, the first farming communities appeared in parts of Greece, and it also shows an introduction of domesticated sheep and goats and cereals around this time, and sites like Sesklo and Nicomedia were established. This was not a widespread European phenomenon yet, but the initial crucial step of the agricultural package, wheat, barley, sheep and goats arriving from Anatolia, marking a pivotal moment in future European development. This millennium in East Asia was critical for the independent development of agriculture. In North China, sites associated with the Pelusiang and Xishan culture show clear evidence for the cultivation of foxtail and broomcorn millet. Jiahu in the Huai River Valley is particularly remarkable, with evidence of domesticated rice, early pottery and possibly the earliest playable musical instruments made from bone flutes. There was also proto-writing symbols on tortoise shells, all dating to the very end of this millennium or just after. In the Yangtze River Basin, sites like Pengtushan continued to show evidence of rice cultivation and distinctive cord-marked pottery. The societal consequences of the shifts in our culture became more apparent during this millennium. While early villages may have maintained largely egalitarian structures, the management of stored surpluses, organisation of communal labour for significant projects like Jericho's fortifications, and the defence of resources likely began to foster rudimentary forms of leadership or social ranking. The health impacts also started to manifest. Studies from skeleton remains from PPNB sites sometimes show evidence of increased infectious disease loads and dental issues associated with agricultural diets. Spiritually and culturally, the shift from hunter-gatherer cosmologies to those more tuned to agricultural cycles and settled life solidified. The intramural burials and plastered skulls found at sites like Jericho, Beta and Ain Ghazal, dating firmly within the PPNB period, highlight a strong emphasis on ancestors and community continuity tied to a place. The proliferation of human figurines, particularly female ones, in PPNB contexts suggests focus on fertility and lineage. The millennium between 8000 and 7000 BC was a period of accelerated change for humanity, particularly in the Fertile Crescent, where the Neolithic package was consolidated and elaborated on. Key events include the construction of Jericho's tower and walls, the flourishing of PPNA and early PPNB culture with its distinctive rectangular architecture and emerging ritual practices, the establishment of significant early agricultural villages like Asklihoyuk and the initial phases of Katlahoyuk, the clear domestication of key cereals and primary livestock, the beginnings of the Neolithic expansion into Europe, and the independent consolidation of millet and early rice agriculture in China. It signified a critical intensification and spread of the Neolithic Revolution, fundamentally altering how many human societies procured food, organised themselves, and interacted with their environment, laying the direct foundations for subsequent societal complexity. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.